Great, so now we know how to insert items into our database and how to update them once they're there. What we're now going to look at is how to return more than one item from our database and how we can do some fancy select queries so we can select users in a number of different ways. Alright, so first off, let's just update our output here so we're getting the whole of the information in the row. And then we actually only need to change a very small part of this. We just add in a while loop, and this is then a container for our row. Like that. So each time we run the command mysqli fetch array, we're actually fetching a new row. So if we run it several times, we'll get all of the rows that have been selected by this query. So in our case, we should get 3 rows, i.e. all the rows in the table. So let's have a look. There we go. Let's have a look at the output. You can see we've got these 3 arrays here. We do have an undefined query. Oh, there we go. Because I didn't get rid of my query there. There we go. Okay, so that's now returned everything in the database, and we could do something with that data if we wanted to, either display it to the user or update it, or even delete it if we wanted to. So how do we become a bit more selective about what we're querying from the database? Well, we actually do it in exactly the same way that we updated the data in the previous video, and that is with a where clause at the end. And what we might want to do then, for example, we might want to get the users with ID equal to 1. What would that return? Pretty easy. It would return the user with an ID of 1, i.e. me. So let's change that to search for Kirsten's user by email address. We just put email equals and then put our email address in quotes like that, and that will then return just Kirsten. There we go. We can do a lot more than that though. So what if we wanted to return all the users whose email was at gmail.com? Well, that's actually pretty easy. We change our equal sign to a like keyword, and then if we leave that as it is, that actually will return the same thing because it's searching for where email address is like Kirsten at kirstenpercival.co.uk. But the advantage of using like means that we can put a variety of symbols in our query. For example, the % symbol. And the % symbol in MySQL essentially means anything. So if I put the % symbol and then gmail.com, this essentially means select everything from the users table where the email ends in gmail.com, i.e. it's something and then gmail.com. So this should return me and Tommy. There we go. So here's a mini challenge for you. Can you return everyone in our database who has a P, the letter P, anywhere in their email address? Go for it. Hope you managed it. It's just a matter of putting % and then P and then another %. So this just means anything and then a P and then anything else. So it essentially looks for the letter P anywhere in the email address. So that returns me and Kirsten, but not Tommy. We can also use greater than or less than symbols. So if we wanted to return everyone whose ID was 2 or more, then we could use select star from users where ID is greater than or equal to 2. And that should return Kirsten and Tommy. There we go. We can also return just a single column. So say that we know we only needed the email address, then it's a bit wasteful to return all this other information as well. So we could just put email inside these acute accents there, and then that would just return the email address. That's a rather more efficient way of dealing with databases if you know what you're going to need in advance. We can also combine where clauses. So let's say if we wanted to find everyone with an ID of greater than or equal to 2 with a T in their email address, then we would put an AND statement there, and then %T, %, and I have put a capital T on purpose there to show you that we're case insensitive here. So none of these have got a capital T, but they have got little t's, and therefore they're returned. If I change that to a G, then we should just get Tommy returned, because Kirsten doesn't have a G in her email address. So I think you get the idea. To our table, and I'm going to do that in phpMyAdmin. So I'm going to click Structure, and then Add One Columns at the end of Table. Go. And the column I'm going to add is Name. And that's going to be a text field. There we go. So now let's browse. And I'm going to just double click there to update my name. And for some reason, I've decided to refer to myself as Rob O'Grady. Feel free to search for that name online to see if I've been using it anywhere. But really what I'm interested in is, of course, that it has that single quote in it. So if now I wanted to select the user with the name Rob O'Grady, I might start off storing the name in a variable, and then I might put it in double quotes like that to save me from having to escape the character by putting a backslash in front of it there. So now, can you update the query string so it returns the users who have a name of Rob O'Grady using this variable name? Go for it. Did you manage it? It was a bit of a trick, but what I was expecting you to do was keeping that part of the query and then changing the where clause to where name equals, and then in single quotes we have the name. So I'm using my concatenating full stop or period there to bring the name variable into the string, and it's inside these single quotes. So that looks like it should work, but if we save it and run it, you'll see we don't get any response at all. And that's because what MySQL is interpreting the name string as is Rob O and then a single quote. So that single quote is interpreted by MySQL as ending this string. So it says it starts with the single quote and then it ends after Rob O. In fact, if we just echo out the query, you'll see that in a bit more detail. So it starts with select email from users where name equals, and then this Rob O is interpreted as a single string, and then the Grady on the end is just another strange word as far as MySQL is concerned, and then there's another single quote there. So this is not a valid piece of MySQL, so it's not processed by the database. There is, however, an easy fix to this, and that is we can use the function mysqli underscore real underscore escape underscore string. So it's a bit of a beast, but it's well named because it escapes any nasty characters that might cause problems in our code. So we actually have to put the database link in there as well, as with our other MySQLi functions. But what this will essentially do is add backslashes where necessary to escape potentially corrupting characters that are going to break our SQL. So let's have a look now. If we run that, it returns fine. So as a general rule of thumb, whenever you're putting a variable into a MySQL string, I would recommend just always escaping it using that function. There's another even more important reason to escape your strings, and that is if there's any chance that the user can edit that string. If you don't use this function, then the user could pretty easily get access to your whole database by putting in a malicious string, which is designed to end your query and start a new one, which could, for example, select everything in your database and extract all your users' data. These are called SQL injection strings. And if you want to find out more about that and how you protect your website from them, then just have a Google of SQL injections. But a very good protection is simply to use this whenever you are taking a variable and putting it into a MySQL string. Then you won't go too far wrong. All right, I'm going to set you a quick challenge then to put all of this together and try and do it without referring back if you possibly can. The idea of this is to get the MySQLi commands in your head. So this is just going to be a very simple sign-up form where you're going to ask for an email and a password. And then when they submit the form, check that the email and password have been entered. Then check that the email address is not already registered. And if all of that's okay, sign the user up, i.e. put them into your database. It doesn't have to look pretty. We're not using Bootstrap or anything here. We just want something that works. Go for it. All right. Hope you managed that. Let's give it a shot. So I'm going to have a form with a method of post. You could use get, but I wouldn't recommend it, especially when passwords are involved. And then in this form, we're going to have an input with a name of email, and we'll give it a placeholder of email address. Then we'll have another input with a name of password and a type of password and a placeholder of password. And actually, we should probably have a type for the first one as well. It's going to be text, which is the default type, but it's always good to have types for all of your inputs. And then finally, we'll have input with a type of submit and a value of sign up. All right, simple as that. Let's have a look. Oh, forgot that we were viewing the source there. Let's go back and actually view the database itself. Excellent. So there's email and password. You can see LastPass is trying to predict things for me, but I'll just ignore that. All right, let's now check at the beginning of our script if we have some post variables, and we're going to do that using the function that we saw before, array key exists, and we're looking for the key email in the array post. And we'll add in an OR to see if they've entered a password. It's pretty unlikely that they will just enter a password, but it is possible. And I think I'll just do a print R if that is the case, just to check. There we go. So we've got our email and our password. And then we'll check to see if the email address and password fields actually have values, i.e. the user has typed something in. So we'll check to see if email is empty. And if it is, we'll echo that the email address is required. Like that. And if it's not, that means that we have an email address. So let's just check for a password. And if that's not there, then we'll tell them, that the password is required. All right, so let's take a look at that. If I now put in an email address, it tells me that the password's required. If I put in a password, it tells me that the email address is required. If I put in both, it does nothing, which is great. Okay, so now we want to check to see if the user exists in our database or not. That's the third and final error that we might see. So let's start off with our query. And we want to select, and let's just select ID from the database, because it'll be more efficient because we don't need everything else. We just need something to tell us whether or not that item is already there. And we want to select it from the users table, where the email address is equal to, and this is where we need our MySQL I real escape string. And we want to escape the email address that they've entered. And then close that and end our query. All right. If you did manage to succeed with this challenge, but you didn't put that in, then a small slap on the wrist for you, because your form was very insecure and open to SQL injections. Oops, and let's not forget to put our link in there as well. And then we run our query. So this is going to be MySQL I query. And we want to send the database link and the query itself. And then we want to check if there's any results in this query. So one way to do that would be to fetch the results as we did before. But I just want to show you one more way that we can do that, which is slightly more efficient. We can use MySQL I and then num rows and result. And this will return the number of rows in the result without actually having to get all the rows themselves. So efficiency is not particularly important in a tiny setup like this, but if you've got a massive website that people are logging into all the time, it does make all the difference. So we should try and be efficient where we possibly can. So if we check to see if the number of rows is greater than 0, then if it is, we'll say to the user that email address has already been taken. All right, hope that makes sense. Let's take a look. So I'm going to put in an email address that has already been taken, robpercival80@gmail.com, put in a password, and then sign up. So that email address has already been taken. Fantastic. If I put in one that hasn't been taken yet and a password, we should not get that error. Wonderful. All right, so the final thing to do then is to actually sign the user up if they've been successful. So we'll do that, of course, with another query. And here we're going to insert into the users table And the columns that we're going to provide are email and password. And the values that we're going to give for them are I'm just going to copy this bit here. So MySQLi real estate string with the link and the email. So that's the email address. And then something very similar for the password. And we'll just close those parentheses there and then end our command. And then we want to run that query. So that'll be MySQLi query link, comma, query. And we'll do a quick check here to see if that's been successful. If it has, we'll echo, you have been signed up. And if not, for now, we'll just say there was a problem signing you up. Please try again later. So that, of course, should never happen, but it's always good to check and make sure that everything has worked in the way that you think it has. So let's just try submitting that one more time. Oh, got an error on line 34. Ah, yes, because we're not actually running the query here. I don't need a closed parentheses. I just need to close the string. All right, we'll try that once more. And there we go. You have been signed up. And we may well have been logged out of PHPMyAdmin now, but let's have a quick look. Yep, we have. So we'll log back in using the password that we're using in our script. And we should see, there we go. We've got a new email address with a password. So one quick note about passwords. As I mentioned before, we should never have our passwords like this in just plain text. And in a couple of videos time, I'll show you the good way to store passwords in your database. Before that though, I want to show you two ways of actually logging users in or signing them up, because it's all well and good to tell them they've been signed up and then put onto a database, but then they're going to click on another link, and we want a way to know on that new link that this user is logged in, and we should show them some information about their account or whatever it is. And there are two primary ways to do that: sessions and cookies. And we're going to look at both of those in the next two videos, starting with sessions.